Okay, we're jumping into a 7th grade standard here. We're going to talk about rates and unit rates again, but taking it one step further. So we're going to build some basic knowledge here to move forward with the next steps. So the first thing I want to ask is, if we've got, it costs $4 for a package of 8 pens, we want to know, how can you represent this as a rate? Because there's always at least 2 ways to represent a rate. So what I mean by that for this first one is that we could say, what we typically think anyways, is $4 for 8 pens, or we can think of it as $4 per 8 pens. Okay, make sure you're getting these notes down just as is. The other way we could think of it, we could flip it around and think of it as 8 pens for $4. So we really can think of it either one of these ways. The only thing is that both of these, while they mean sort of the same thing, we're really thinking of it as cost per pens versus pens per cost. So as a rate, that's perfectly fine. It's when we start thinking of it as a unit rate, that's when it's a little bit different. Because remember, a unit rate, the second quantity is what's getting scaled down to 1. So let's try doing each one of these to see the difference of what these each mean. So for this first one, we've got our $4 and 8 pens, and we're scaling down to, okay, how much is it going to cost for 1 pen? So we're going from 8 down to 1. So we're doing 8 divided by 8 to get 1. So we're doing 4 divided by 8, which is the same as half, or we can think of that as 50 cents. Now, if you want to do that division to double check because you don't totally understand, feel free to do that, but that's not my goal with this video. I want to show you the difference between these unit rates. So when you are dealing with this unit or this rate of $4 for 8 pens and you're scaling down to 1 pen, that is where you're going to end up with 50 cents per pen. However, when we do this next rate of 8 pens for $4, now we're not scaling down to 1 pen, we're scaling down to $1. So we're doing 4 divided by 1, and so that means we're doing 8 divided by 4 to get 2 pens. So these unit rates mean very different things. This one is meaning cost per pen. This one is meaning pens per dollar or pens per cost. That's entirely different. Okay? These are both correct in what we've done because we're scaling that second number down to 1. Okay? So which unit rate is more common and easier for us to use, do you think? Does it make more sense to think cost per pen or pens per dollar? Well, think about it. Are you really going to just be like, hey, I got $1. How many pens can I get for that? No, typically it's going to be like, all right, I want to know how much does it cost for one individual pen to know what this price really is. So that is the one that's going to be more beneficial to us, is knowing cost per pen. That's the more common, easier one to use, because then if it's multiple pens, we can figure it out for any of them, whereas we don't usually think of pens and then dollars, okay? If you're having trouble understanding that, I'm happy to talk more about it with you. Feel free to come over and ask, but let's try another example real quick. So let's get a little bit different here. Hold on, this is not, there we go. It's jumping around on me. Sorry about that. There we go. So we've got driving 24 miles in 15 minutes. We want to know, what are all the possible ways you can represent this as a rate? Is there more than one way we could write it? How else could we represent the time? So sometimes we can write these in more than one ways, like we did on the last one. Sometimes there's even more than just 2 ways. So I'm going to show you one way. If you want to try and see if you can guess these on your own, feel free, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the first way, that's probably the most obvious, is saying 24 miles in 15 minutes, right? That's what they just give us, and we're just writing it as a rate. That is one way to write this. However, we could think of the time in a different way. Instead of thinking 15 minutes, a lot of times we don't say miles per minute. A lot of times we say miles per hour. So I could think of the 15 minutes as a quarter of an hour, right? So 0.25 hours. I could represent that as a decimal, or I can represent it as a fraction. Either one of those is correct. So I can represent this rate in 3 different ways so far by saying miles per minute or miles per hour. But what if we flip it around and do minutes per mile? Well, that'd be the same thing except just flipping it upside down. So 15 minutes in 24 miles. So it's taking this and just flip-flopping it. We can do the same thing for these other 2 as well. Instead of having the time being second, we could have it come first instead. It all still means the same thing. The only thing that's different is when we go to do the unit rate, which is what we'll start talking about in 1B more. But right now, these are just the ways you can write this particular rate, the 24 miles in 15 minutes. So you have a quick check, and you're going to do the same idea that we just did up here, but now you're talking about running 5 miles in 30 minutes. So I want you to list all the possible rates of how you could write that. Think about what would come on top versus bottom. Can you write the time in a different way? I want as many options as possible. You can use these notes to help you. Make sure you get a teacher signature on that before moving on. Good luck. You can do it.